At 2:17 a.m., a single message blinked on her phone. 10 simple words that tore her world apart. He chose me, not you. Stop calling him, Mom! Olivia Hayes froze in her bed, the blue glow of her phone washing across her face. The words pierced deeper than any blade. Her son, Adam, had never spoken to her like that. Not even during the rebellious teenage years when he'd slammed doors and rolled his eyes. But this came from someone else. From Emily, his wife. She sat there, heart pounding, staring at the message. Her trembling fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether to reply or to let silence be her dignity. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the steady ticking of the old clock on the wall, a sound that had comforted her since her husband Daniel passed away 5 years ago. That night, the clock felt cruel, counting down the seconds of a love she was losing. Earlier that evening, Olivia had dropped by Adam and Emily's house with homemade chicken pot pie, Adam's favorite since he was 5. She'd expected smiles, laughter, maybe even a movie night like old times. Instead, Emily met her at the door, lips tight, eyes colder than winter glass. "Adam's busy," she'd said, barely opening the door wide enough for Olivia to step inside. "I just came by to drop dinner." "I told you. He's busy." Something inside Olivia sank. There was no mistaking it now. Emily didn't just dislike her. She wanted her gone. That night, Olivia drove home in silence, her car headlights cutting through the misty back roads of Savannah, Georgia. Her chest ached with the kind of loneliness that didn't come from being alone, but from being unwanted. She'd been a mother who gave everything. Double shifts at the diner, sleepless nights through Adam's asthma attacks, every prayer she could remember whispered for his future. And now, her only son was drifting away, pulled by the invisible current of a woman's ambition. Olivia's mind wandered to her husband, Daniel, a quiet man who built his family with calloused hands and a gentle heart. When he died, Adam was the one who stood beside her, promising, "Mom, I'll always be your home." But promises made in grief fade fast in the noise of new love. In the weeks that followed, the tension deepened. Emily began managing Adam's new business venture, a small tech startup backed by her father's connections. She took control of meetings, emails, and eventually of Adam's time. Olivia tried to stay supportive, but her instincts screamed that something was off. Emily wasn't just steering the business, she was steering Adam's entire life. One Friday afternoon, Olivia stopped by their office with coffee and cookies, hoping to surprise them. But what she saw stopped her in the doorway. Emily stood over Adam's desk, her voice sharp. "Your mom keeps meddling. You think investors take us seriously when she just shows up like that?" "I'll talk to her," Adam muttered, eyes low. "You said that last week. Do you want to run a company or a daycare?" Olivia backed away quietly, heart racing. Her son's voice followed her, not in words but in silence. He didn't defend her. Not once. That night she sat alone on her porch, a mug of cold tea forgotten in her hands. She looked out at the stars scattered across the southern sky, the same sky she used to lie under with Adam when he was little, counting constellations and dreaming about the future. She whispered, "Where did I lose you, baby?" No answer came, only the chirp of crickets and the faint sound of thunder rolling in the distance. Days turned into weeks, and every attempt she made to reconnect was met with polite dismissal. A text here, a short call there. Then the message arrived at 2:17 a.m., shattering what little peace she had left. The next morning, Olivia drove to the church, the same white chapel where she'd married Daniel, where she'd baptized Adam, where she'd buried half her heart in the cold Georgia soil. She sat on the back pew and let the silence settle over her like a blanket. "Lord," she whispered, "if this is punishment, I accept it. But if this is a test, please don't let me lose my son." Tears fell, quiet and steady. A familiar hand touched her shoulder. It was Pastor Grant, an old friend of the family. "Olivia," he said softly, "you can't control how people love you. but you can control how you love them back. His words didn't fix the ache, but they gave her something to hold on to, a kind of strength that came from surrender, not defiance. That night, Olivia sat at her kitchen table and opened a blank notebook. She began writing letters to her son, letters she never intended to send. Each one was a prayer wrapped in ink. Words she couldn't say out loud. I forgive you. I miss you. I still believe in the boy you used to be. The first few pages blurred with tears, but she kept writing until dawn crept through the curtains. Outside, the first light of morning touched the magnolia trees in her yard, soft, golden, and alive. Olivia closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and whispered, "All right, God, if love's a battle, teach me how to fight gently." But she didn't know, far from her quiet home, Emily was already setting her next move in motion, one that would test every ounce of that faith. A week passed, and the air around Olivia's house grew heavier, like the stillness before a summer storm. She tried to distract herself with chores, folding laundry, pruning her roses, baking pies she never delivered, but nothing silenced the ache. Every creak in the floorboards reminded her of the footsteps that no longer echoed there. Every photo on the wall was a reminder of a love now tangled in silence. One afternoon, she received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was sweet, careful, too careful. "Mrs. Hayes? This is Lauren. I work with your son at the firm. There's something I think you should know, but please don't tell anyone I called." Olivia's breath caught. "What is it?" Lauren hesitated. "Emily's been making changes. She's slowly transferring ownership of Adam's business into her father's company. He doesn't know. She keeps him busy with meetings and deals that never happen. I just thought you should know, before it's too late." Olivia clutched the phone tighter. Her fingers trembled. "Are you sure?" "I've seen the papers myself," Lauren whispered. "Please be careful. Emily's not who she pretends to be." The call ended before Olivia could respond. She sat in silence, her mind spinning. Could it be true? Was Emily really capable of that kind of manipulation? Deep down, a quiet voice answered, yes. That evening, Olivia drove to Adam's office. The parking lot was empty except for Adam's truck and a black Mercedes she recognized as Emily's. Through the glass window, she saw them inside. Adam sitting at his desk. Emily standing behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder. They looked like a perfect couple to anyone passing by, but Olivia saw something different. Emily's smile was too polished. Adam's eyes were tired, distant. She waited until Emily left the office, then stepped inside. Adam looked up, startled. "Mom? What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," she said softly, closing the door behind her. "It's important." "Emily said you've been— I don't care what Emily said. I just need you to listen." She placed her hand on his desk, trying to steady her voice. "Someone called me today. She said Emily's transferring your company to her father's name." Adam frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. "Mom, please don't start this again. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm telling you because I love you. I don't want you to lose everything your father worked for." Adam sighed heavily. "You think I don't check the books? You think I'd let that happen?" "I think love makes people blind," she whispered. His expression hardened. "You need to stop, Mom. You're crossing a line." "No, Adam," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm trying to keep you from falling off a cliff." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "Emily warned me this would happen. She said you'd try to turn me against her. You need to trust me, not your gossip." "I do trust you," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "But I don't trust her." His jaw tightened. "Maybe you should go." The words hit harder than she expected. She nodded, stepping back slowly. "All right," she whispered. "But remember what I said." She turned toward the door, her heart breaking with every step. When she reached her car, she looked back at the office window. Emily had returned. Her arm wrapped around Adam's waist like she was marking territory. And then Emily looked directly at her. Their eyes met through the glass. Emily smiled, slow and deliberate, before turning away. That smile was the proof Olivia didn't want but desperately needed. It wasn't warmth. It was victory. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. The words replayed in her mind like a cruel lullaby. Maybe you should go. She tossed and turned, haunted by Emily's smirk, by the sound of her son's voice, sharp and distant. Around 3 a.m, she went to the kitchen and opened her old photo album. The first picture was of Adam as a baby, grinning in his father's arms. Daniel's eyes were kind, steady, full of promise. "If you were here," she whispered to the photo, "you'd know what to do." The next day, Olivia made a decision. She wasn't going to sit back and watch her son's life unravel. She'd lost too much already, her husband, her peace, her place in her son's heart. She refused to lose him completely. She drove to Lauren's office during lunch hour. Lauren was young, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and a cautious smile. "Mrs. Hayes," she said quietly, "I didn't think you'd come." "You said you had proof," Olivia replied. Lauren nodded and handed her a folder. Inside were copies of contracts, financial transfers, and legal drafts, all with Emily's father's signature. "She's clever," Lauren explained. "Everything looks legitimate, but it's designed to corner Adam. Once those documents go through, he won't own a thing." Olivia stared at the pages, her heart pounding. "Why are you helping me?" Lauren hesitated. "Because I saw what Emily did to her last partner. She took everything and left him bankrupt. I can't watch her do it again." Olivia placed a hand on Lauren's shoulder. "You're a brave girl." "Thank you." That night, Olivia prayed again, but this time, her words carried strength instead of sorrow. "God, I don't want revenge. I just want truth. Please open Adam's eyes before it's too late." The next morning, she gathered the documents and placed them in a brown envelope. She drove to Adam's house, rehearsing what she'd say, how she'd show him the truth gently. But when she arrived, Emily was already standing in the driveway, waiting, arms crossed, eyes cold. "I figured you'd try something like this," Emily said, stepping closer. "You think I don't know you've been digging?" Olivia's grip tightened on the envelope. "You can fool my son, but not me." Emily smiled faintly. "You're pathetic, Olivia. You can't stand that he's not your little boy anymore. You hate that someone younger, smarter, and prettier took your place." Olivia's voice trembled but held steady. "This isn't about me. It's about what you're doing to him." "You're done interfering," Emily hissed. "If you show him those papers, I'll make sure he never speaks to you again." "He already doesn't," Olivia said softly. "So what else can you take?" For a moment, they stood inches apart, mother and daughter-in-law, love and hate locked in a quiet war. Then Emily leaned in, her voice low. "You'll regret crossing me." Olivia turned away, clutching the envelope to her chest. She walked back to her car, her heart racing. As she drove off, she looked in the rearview mirror. Emily stood there watching, her smile curling like smoke. Olivia didn't know how, but she could feel it deep in her bones. This battle had just begun, and Emily wasn't the kind of enemy who played fair. But neither was a mother who prayed with fire in her soul. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the kind of sky that pressed against your chest and made every breath feel heavier. Olivia sat at her kitchen table, the brown envelope lying in front of her like a loaded weapon. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. She stared at the papers, debating whether to take them to Adam or burn them just to feel the weight of it all lift for a moment. But something inside her, that same stubborn love that had carried her through every storm, wouldn't let her quit. A mother doesn't give up. She fights, even when the world calls her foolish. At 10 a.m., she called Adam. No answer. She called again, straight to voicemail. The third time she left a message. "Adam, it's Mom. I need to see you. It's about something important. About your company. Please, son, just call me back." Her voice cracked on the last word. She hung up and waited, her eyes fixed on the phone as if sheer will could make it ring. But it stayed silent. Hours passed. By evening, Olivia couldn't sit still any longer. She grabbed the envelope and drove to his office. Rain began to fall, slow, steady, like a whisper from heaven warning her to be careful. When she arrived, the parking lot was empty again except for Emily's Mercedes. Through the window, she saw lights still on inside. She hesitated, her fingers tapping the steering wheel. Then she took a deep breath, stepped out, and walked to the door. Inside, voices drifted through the hallway. Low, sharp, unmistakable. She followed them quietly until she reached Adam's office door. It was slightly open. She peered through the crack and froze. Emily stood with her back to him, her voice dripping with disdain. "You should have told me your mother was snooping around again." "She called someone at the firm." Adam sighed. "I didn't think she'd actually do it." "She's making you look weak, Adam. Do you know what that does to your reputation?" "I'll handle it," he said, rubbing his temples. "Handle it?" Emily snapped, spinning toward him. "You've been saying that for weeks. If you don't cut her off, I will." Olivia's heart thudded. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Don't you dare threaten my son." Emily froze, then turned slowly, her face twisting into something between shock and fury. "You shouldn't be here." "I wouldn't have to be," Olivia said, voice trembling with righteous anger. "If you hadn't been stealing from him." Adam stood, his expression torn between disbelief and exhaustion. "Mom, not again." "Look at the papers, Adam," she interrupted, pulling the envelope from her purse. "These are contracts transferring your company to her father's name. Read them, please." Emily crossed her arms, her smile returning like a knife disguised as kindness. "Oh, so now we're playing detective? How cute." But Adam's eyes flickered, just for a second. Uncertain. He took the papers, flipping through them. The silence stretched long and tense. Olivia could hear every heartbeat in her chest. Finally, Adam looked up. "Emily, what is this?" Emily laughed softly, almost pityingly. "It's called business, Adam. Something your mother doesn't understand." "You signed my name on these." His voice was quiet, but dangerous. "It was temporary," Emily said quickly. "Your father-in-law was helping with an investment. You'll get everything back once the merger is finalized." "Merger?" he repeated. "With who?" "With your company," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "She's merging it away from you." "Adam, don't listen to her," Emily began, but he cut her off. "Enough." He dropped the papers on the desk. "I trusted you," Emily stepped closer. "And you still can." "I did it for us." "For us?" he said bitterly. "Or for your father's bank account?" For a long moment no one spoke. The only sound was the rain pounding against the windows. Finally, Emily's mask cracked. Her eyes hardened. "You think your mother's on your side?" "She's jealous, Adam. She can't stand that someone else matters more than she does." Olivia felt the words stab deep, but she stayed silent, tears glistening in her eyes. Adam looked between them, the woman who raised him and the woman he thought he'd build a future with. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I need time," Emily's lips parted. "Time?" "Adam, don't be— I said I need time." He turned away, shoulders slumped, and walked out of the office. Emily's eyes blazed as she watched him go. When the door shut behind him, she turned back to Olivia. "You'll regret this," Emily hissed. "Maybe," Olivia said softly. "But at least I'll sleep knowing I did what was right." Emily took a step forward, her face inches from Olivia's. "You think you've won? You've just declared war." Olivia didn't flinch. "Then may the truth be my weapon." When Olivia got home, she was shaking. Not from fear, but from the emotional storm that had finally broken. She sat on her couch, staring at the rain sliding down the windows, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. It wasn't over, far from it, but a seed of truth had been planted. 2 days passed without a word from Adam. She left him space, though each hour of silence felt like walking barefoot over broken glass. On the third morning, her phone finally rang. It was Adam. "Mom." His voice was quiet, uncertain. "I read through everything again. You were right. She forged my signature on 2 contracts. I confronted her last night." Olivia's breath caught. "And?" She denied it, of course. Said it was a misunderstanding. "But I don't think I can trust her anymore." "Oh, honey," Olivia said softly, tears filling her eyes. I wish I'd been wrong. I know, he said, his voice breaking. I don't know what to do now. Start with the truth, she whispered. The rest will follow. That night, Adam stayed at his mother's house for the first time in months. He looked tired, older somehow. They sat together on the porch, the cicadas humming their slow southern song. I used to think love meant never doubting someone, Adam said quietly. But now I think real love is about seeing the truth, even when it hurts. Olivia reached over and took his hand. That's the kind of love that survives storms. He nodded, eyes distant. I just wish I'd listened sooner. Don't, she said gently. You're here now. That's what matters. The moon rose high above the magnolia trees, soft and silver, casting their shadows over the porch. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt peace stirring inside her. Fragile, but real. But somewhere across town, Emily sat in her darkened living room, staring at the empty space beside her. The wine glass in her hand trembled as she whispered into the darkness, You think you can take him from me? Watch me burn it all down first. And in that whispered promise, the storm began to gather again. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, Olivia already knew peace never lasts long when the truth begins to surface. The air was still. Too still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Adam had left early that morning, saying he needed to collect a few things from the apartment he'd once shared with Emily. Olivia stood at the window, watching his car disappear down the road, her chest heavy with both hope and dread. She didn't know that on the other side of town, Emily Reynolds was already plotting her counterattack. Emily sat in her father's study, a cold fire flickering in her eyes. The older man, Robert Reynolds, listened quietly as she spoke, his hands clasped behind his back. He's siding with her now, Emily said, her tone sharp and controlled. His mother thinks she's clever. She's been hiding money, I know it. If we expose her, the public fallout alone will ruin her. Robert sighed. Emily, you're talking about your husband's mother. There's a line you don't cross. She crossed it first, Emily snapped. She humiliated me in front of Adam, accused me of theft. If she wants war, fine. I'll give her one. Her father studied her face, the determination there unsettling even to him. What are you planning? Emily smiled, the kind that carried no warmth. A legal war. If I can't control Adam, I'll control the damage. I have contacts at the Securities Commission. One anonymous inquiry about questionable financial activity, and suddenly everyone will be very interested in where Olivia Turner keeps her money. Her father's brow furrowed. That's dangerous, Emily. You don't poke that kind of bear. Emily looked up sharply. She's been hiding something for years. All those donations, all those shell companies. Don't tell me you haven't wondered where the money comes from. It's time someone dragged her into the light. Robert hesitated. He wanted to stop her, but Emily was already pulling out her phone, her manicured fingers typing with purpose. If she wants to play queen, Emily murmured, then she better be ready for the crown to burn. That same afternoon, Olivia received a call from her longtime financial advisor, James Sullivan. His tone was clipped, professional, but beneath the surface she heard the tremor of urgency. Olivia, we've got a situation. Someone's made formal inquiries with the SEC about your investment accounts. They're asking specific questions. Insider trading, ownership declarations, shell structures. This isn't random. Someone's trying to build a case. Olivia's heart dropped like a stone. How bad is it? It depends. Your records are clean, but complex structures look suspicious from the outside. If this escalates, they could freeze your assets while they investigate. That could take months, maybe years. And who would have filed this? Olivia asked, though the answer was already clawing its way to the front of her mind. There was a pause. You tell me. Who stands to gain if your name ends up in headlines? Her stomach turned. Emily. Of course it was Emily. She could feel the fury building beneath her ribs, not wild or reckless, but cold and steady. The kind of anger that sharpened rather than destroyed. Thank you, James, she said quietly. Handle what you can. I'll deal with the rest." When she hung up, the silence of the house pressed against her like a weight. She walked to the mantel where a framed photo of Adam as a boy sat beside one of her late husband, Michael. "You always said business was war with better suits," she whispered to the picture. "I guess I never believed you, until now." That evening, when Adam returned, he looked worn down but calmer than before. He set his keys on the counter and said softly, "I went to see her." Olivia's pulse spiked. "Emily?" He nodded. She was furious. "Said you were trying to destroy her life." But when I asked about the forged signatures, she didn't deny them. "She said I owed her stability." Olivia exhaled, trying to keep her voice steady. "That's not love, Adam, that's control." He nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "I know. I told her I needed space. I think it's over." For a fleeting moment, relief washed through her, but it was short-lived. The next morning, the headlines hit. Local investor under SEC scrutiny, hidden accounts and insider ties. Olivia stared at the paper, her hands trembling. It was her name in bold letters, twisted into something unrecognizable. Every detail was true in fragments, but false in meaning. They'd taken her financial privacy, something she'd guarded for decades, and turned it into suspicion. The phone began ringing. Reporters, lawyers, even old acquaintances pretending to check in. Olivia ignored them all until one number made her freeze. It was Adam. "Mom!" His voice was tense. "What's going on?" "Someone's trying to frame me," she said. "Emily?" "I think so. Or her father. Maybe both," he cursed under his breath. "What can I do?" "Nothing yet," she said. "But you'll need to stay out of it publicly. The more they can link us, the worse it'll look." He was silent for a long time. "You shouldn't have to fight this alone." "I'm not," she said softly. "I've got the truth on my side." But truth, she knew, didn't always win quickly. By the end of the week, James called again. "Olivia, they've filed a preliminary complaint. It's not an official case yet, but it's moving in that direction." Olivia closed her eyes, steadying herself. "Then we stop it before it grows. How?" "I'll meet them head on." The following Monday, she called James to arrange a meeting, not just with the investigators, but with everyone involved. She wanted the playing field visible, the lies exposed in daylight. That's how, 3 days later, Olivia found herself sitting in the boardroom of Sullivan and Chase, facing the people who had tried to dismantle her life. On one side sat her attorney and James. On the other, Emily, her lawyer Mark Vance, and her father, Robert Reynolds. And in the middle, torn and weary but present, sat Adam. The tension was thick enough to cut. Mark Vance began smoothly, his tone rehearsed. "Mrs. Turner, my client has raised concerns regarding undisclosed assets and financial manipulation affecting her marriage and family." James leaned forward. "Your client filed false regulatory complaints in retaliation for a personal dispute. That's malicious, not moral." Emily's voice sliced through the air. "This isn't about revenge. It's about honesty. Olivia's been living a double life, pretending to be humble while hiding millions in shadow accounts." "That deception hurt my husband." Olivia met her gaze, unflinching. "No, Emily. What hurt your husband was marrying someone who valued wealth over love." A flicker of emotion crossed Emily's face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Robert cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all calm down." "Calm," Olivia interrupted, standing. "You tried to destroy me with lies. You invaded my privacy, forged documents, and used my son as leverage. You don't deserve calm." The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Then Olivia turned to Adam. "You wanted to see who everyone really was, sweetheart." "Well, here it is." He looked from his mother to his wife. The truth now laid bare in front of him like open wounds, and in that moment, something in his eyes shifted. That night, I couldn't sleep. The clock on my bedside table blinked 2:30 in the morning, but my mind kept circling around the same thought. If Jessica was capable of hiring a private investigator to dig into my past, what else was she capable of? I walked out to the porch where the night air was thick and quiet. the kind of stillness that makes your heartbeat sound louder. The old oak tree stood like a sentinel under the moonlight, and I remembered the words my late husband once told me. The people who smile too much are often the ones you should look twice at. Jessica's smile had always been perfect. Too perfect. The next morning, I decided to pay a visit to my attorney, Mr. Wallace, a man I had trusted for over 20 years. He looked startled when I showed up unannounced. "Emily," he said, setting down his coffee mug. "I was just about to call you. Something strange came up regarding your trust documents." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then handed me a printed email from his assistant. It was a request to transfer a portion of my estate, 30%, into a joint account with my son's name. "This was submitted 2 days ago," he said, "but I didn't authorize it because the signature didn't match yours." My fingers trembled as I looked at the forged signature. It was almost perfect. Almost. "Jessica," I whispered. Wallace frowned. "Do you think your daughter-in-law could have done this?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence said everything. Later that day, Dylan called me, his voice strained. "Mom, Jessica said you've been distant lately. She thinks you're upset about something." I bit my tongue. He didn't need to know yet. "I'm just tired, honey," I said softly, forcing calm. "Sometimes people need a little space to see things clearly." He sighed, unsure of how to respond, then hung up with a distracted goodbye. I could hear her voice in the background. It was like a knife through my chest. By sunset, I was sitting on my porch again, watching the horizon burn orange and pink. My phone buzzed. A message from James Sullivan, my financial advisor. "I think you should see this in person. It's urgent." I drove to his office the next morning. James looked tense, scrolling through a folder on his computer. "Emily," he said, "Jessica contacted me last week pretending to speak on your behalf. She wanted access to your offshore investments." My stomach dropped. "And you didn't give it to her, right?" "Of course not," he replied. "But she knew things only you or I should know. Account numbers, code phrases, even your old security question, the name of your childhood dog." I felt dizzy. How could she know that? Unless Dylan had told her. He must have, unknowingly. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom staring at my reflection. For years, I had told myself that love and forgiveness were stronger than suspicion. That family, no matter how imperfect, deserved the benefit of the doubt. But standing there, I realized something terrifying. Trust could be the most dangerous weapon of all. The next morning, I invited Jessica over. Her response was instant, cheerful. "Of course, Mom. I'll bring muffins." I smiled at the text, though my hands were shaking. When she arrived, she looked radiant in a soft blue dress, the picture of innocence. "I thought we could talk," I said as we sat down with tea. "About family, about honesty." Her smile tightened just a little. "Of course." I leaned forward. "Jessica, I know what you did. I know about the investigator, the forged documents, the calls to my advisors." Her face paled. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she laughed softly as if I had made a silly joke. "You're mistaken, Emily. You've always been so imaginative." I slid the email and the forged form across the table. Imaginative enough to sign my name? The color drained completely from her face. She looked down at the papers, then back at me. "You don't understand?" she said in a whisper. "I was trying to protect Dylan." "Protect him from what?" I demanded. "From me? From the woman who raised him, who paid for his college, who helped him through every failure?" Her voice cracked. "From losing everything. He's never been good with money, Emily. And you, sitting on millions, acting like you're untouchable." I just wanted him to have security, to have control for once in his life. My heart ached at her twisted reasoning. "You wanted control," I said quietly. "Not him, you." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was something cold behind them, something rehearsed. "You'll ruin everything," she whispered. "If Dylan finds out, it'll destroy him." "No, Jessica," I said, my tone sharper now. "You already did that." She stood up suddenly, knocking over her cup. Tea spilled across the table, seeping into the papers. "You're making a mistake, Emily. she hissed, voice trembling. You think you know what you're doing, but this isn't over. I watched her storm out, her heels clicking against the hardwood like the ticking of a bomb. For a long moment, I sat in silence, the air heavy and still. Then I reached for my phone and called James. I want to move everything, I said. Every asset, every account, into a trust Dylan can't touch until I'm gone. That'll make waves, James warned. Good, I said. Let them crash. But as I hung up, a deep sadness washed over me. Somewhere inside, I still wanted to believe Jessica loved my son. That maybe she hadn't meant for it to go this far. Yet I knew once lies begin, they spread like wildfire, consuming everything in their path. That night, rain pounded against the windows and thunder echoed in the distance. I sat in the dark, listening to the storm, knowing it wasn't just outside. It was coming straight for me. The morning after the storm, the air smelled of wet earth and regret. Branches were scattered across my yard, and puddles glistened like tiny mirrors of chaos. I brewed myself a cup of coffee, but my hands were still trembling from the night before. I couldn't shake the sound of Jessica's voice, that sharp edge of threat hidden beneath the tremble. This isn't over. Those words haunted me more than the thunder. Around noon, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Dylan stood there, eyes bloodshot, hair messy, looking like he hadn't slept. Mom, he said, his voice low and uneven, we need to talk. I nodded, motioning him inside. He didn't sit down. He stood by the window, staring out at the driveway, hands clenched. Jessica told me everything, he said finally. My pulse quickened. Everything? He turned and the hurt in his eyes cut straight through me. She said you accused her of stealing, of forging signatures, of trying to get to your money. Is that true? I exhaled slowly. It's not an accusation, Dylan. It's proof. I showed her the documents. And you think she did it? He snapped, his voice rising. Mom, she loves me. She wouldn't... She did, I interrupted softly. You don't want to believe it, but you need to see her for who she really is. His jaw tightened, eyes flashing. No, you need to stop. You've never liked her. You've judged her since the moment we got engaged. You think everyone's out to take something from you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I think you're blind because you love her. And love makes fools of us all. The room went silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the mantel. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Dylan shook his head. I can't do this right now, he said, heading for the door. Dylan! I called out, please, just listen to me. But he was already gone. I stood there, the door still open, rainwater dripping from the porch roof, mixing with my tears. Hours passed and the house felt colder, emptier. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a memory of my son's laughter. Every shadow seemed to whisper, you've lost him. I sat by the window as dusk fell, watching the sky turn from gold to gray. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. You should have kept quiet, Emily. Some secrets are better left buried. My heart stopped. I stared at the message, reading it again and again. Then I dialed James's number, but it went straight to voicemail. My mind raced. Was it Jessica? Or someone working for her? The thought of it made my stomach twist. That night, I double-locked every door and window. I even set the alarm system I rarely used. As I lay in bed, every sound made me flinch. The wind brushing against the siding, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Around midnight, I thought I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate. I froze, holding my breath. The motion light flickered on outside, casting a pale glow through the curtains. But when I peered through the window, there was no one there. Only the wet shimmer of the driveway and the wind stirring the trees. I told myself it was my imagination, but deep down, I knew fear had a way of sharpening the truth. The next morning, I went to see Paula Reynolds, Jessica's mother. We hadn't spoken in months, but I needed answers. Paula lived in a modern townhouse on the edge of town, her world perfectly curated with scented candles and polite smiles. When she opened the door, she looked genuinely surprised. Emily, my goodness, it's been ages. Come in, I didn't waste time. Paula, I need to know what Jessica's been doing. Her smile faltered. Doing? She's been forging documents, contacting my financial advisors, trying to access my accounts. I have proof. Paula's hand went to her chest. That can't be true. Jessica wouldn't she? I cut in, my tone harder than I meant it to be. You know her better than anyone. Tell me honestly, has she ever done anything like this before? Paula hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Paula, I pressed gently, please. This isn't about blame. It's about protecting Dylan. She sighed, her expression softening. Jessica's always wanted more, she admitted quietly. Even as a girl. She hated feeling small, hated being told no. When she met your son and found out who you were, well, she said it was her chance to finally have the life she deserved. My heart sank. Did she ever say anything about my money? Paula's lips tightened. Not directly, but she used to talk about opportunities and how some people didn't appreciate what they had. I stood up, suddenly feeling lightheaded. Thank you, Paula, I said softly. You've told me what I needed to know. As I left, she grabbed my arm. Be careful, Emily, she whispered. Jessica doesn't lose gracefully. When I got home, there was a small envelope waiting on my doorstep. No stamp, no return address. My name was written in looping cursive. My stomach twisted as I tore it open. Inside was a photo. It was of me, standing in my yard 2 nights ago, looking out at the storm. The picture had been taken from across the street. My breath caught in my throat. On the back, written in the same handwriting, were 5 chilling words. I told you this isn't over. I dropped the photo, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The walls around me suddenly felt like they were closing in. Someone was watching me. Someone had been there in the dark, waiting. I locked the door again and sat down on the floor, clutching the photo to my chest. For the first time in years, I felt small, powerless, alone. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, about fear, about punishment for daring to expose the truth. Jessica wasn't just fighting to win. She was fighting to destroy me. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. My heart leapt before I even looked at the screen. It was Dylan. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe he finally understood. Maybe he was ready to talk. But as soon as I answered, that hope collapsed. His voice was cold, clipped. Mom, Jessica got an anonymous letter last night. Someone left it on our porch. It had copies of your financial statements, trust accounts, even your will. She says it's proof you're trying to cut me out. I felt my stomach drop. That's not true, I said quickly. Those documents were stolen. Dylan, she's playing you. Stop, he snapped. Just stop. You think I can't see what's happening? You're trying to control everything. My marriage, my future, even my life. I'm trying to save you, I said softly. From someone who doesn't love you the way you think she does. His breathing was ragged, angry. You know what's funny? He said bitterly. She said you'd say that. That you'd turn me against her. That's what manipulators do. I could barely speak. You really believe her over me? I don't know what to believe anymore, he said, voice breaking. But I can't do this, Mom, not until you stop interfering. The line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. My own son, my only child, had turned against me. I sank into the chair by the window, tears spilling down my face. How did we get here? How did love turn into war? For the next few days, the house was painfully quiet. I kept the curtains drawn, barely eating, barely sleeping. Every shadow outside made my skin crawl. I knew Jessica was behind that photo, behind the message, maybe even behind the stolen documents. But I couldn't prove it. And without proof, I looked paranoid, unstable. Exactly what she wanted. On the 3rd night, I received another message, this time a video. It was a shaky recording of me leaving James Sullivan's office. The caption read, "Sneaky old woman planning her next lie." My blood ran cold. I called James immediately, but again, no answer. Panic crawled up my spine. I drove to his office the next morning, but when I arrived, the door was locked and the blinds were drawn. The receptionist next door told me he hadn't been in for 2 days. Said he was taking time off, she said, shrugging. Looked stressed. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I went back to my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, and for the first time in years, I prayed out loud. God, if you're still listening, please, show me what to do, because I can't fight this alone. That night, I decided to take action. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, the forged documents, the threatening notes, the photo, and I made copies. Then I put them in a small lockbox and drove to the police station. The officer at the front desk, a young woman with kind eyes, listened carefully as I explained. When I showed her the envelope and the photo, her expression darkened. We'll file a report, she said, and we'll send someone to check on you tonight. Don't open the door for anyone unless it's one of us. I nodded, feeling both relief and dread. When I got home, the sun had already set. I locked every door, checked every window, and sat in the living room with the lights off, waiting. The house creaked and groaned as if holding its breath. Around 11, headlights swept across the front yard. A car, my heart pounded. I peeked through the curtain. It was Dylan's truck. He got out, alone, his shoulders slumped, rain dripping from his hair. I rushed to the door and opened it before he could knock. Dylan? I whispered. He looked exhausted. Can I come in? Of course. He stepped inside, dripping onto the floor. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I don't know what to believe anymore, he said softly. Jessica's been acting strange since that letter. She's been locking her phone, taking calls outside, and yesterday she told me not to visit you again. Said it wasn't safe. I swallowed hard. And what did you think? He hesitated. I think something's not right. I went through her things today. Her laptop, her bag, and I found this. He pulled out a flash drive and handed it to me. My hands trembled as I took it. What's on it? Emails, he said. Between her and a man named Mark Nolan. He's the private investigator she hired. They've been planning something for months. She told him to gather leverage in case you got in the way. I felt the blood drain from my face. Leverage, I whispered. That's what this is about. Dylan nodded, guilt heavy in his voice. I should have believed you. I'm so sorry, Mom. I reached for his hand and squeezed it. You see now? This isn't just greed, it's revenge. He frowned. Revenge for what? For saying no, I said quietly. For not giving her everything she wanted. He rubbed his face, weary. We need to go to the police. I already did, I told him. But now we have proof. For a brief moment, hope returned. But it vanished the second headlights flashed outside again, brighter this time, sweeping across the yard. Dylan and I both froze. Were you expecting someone? He asked. I shook my head. No. The sound of footsteps echoed on the porch. A shadow moved past the window. Then a sharp knock. 3 times. I whispered, Stay here, and grabbed the small revolver I kept locked in the drawer by the kitchen. My hands shook as I approached the door. Who's there? I called. No answer. Just another knock, slower this time. Dylan whispered, Mom, maybe it's the police. I took a deep breath and looked through the peephole. My heart stopped. Standing in the rain, drenched and trembling, was Jessica. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, eyes wild. When I opened the door a crack, she stumbled forward, sobbing. Emily, please, she cried. You have to help me. He's gone too far. I frowned. Who? Mark, she said, her voice shaking. He's out of control. He said if I don't get the money tonight, he'll ruin everything. He has everything. Your files, the fake documents, the recordings. He's blackmailing me. Dylan stepped forward, his voice harsh. Jessica, what did you do? She collapsed to her knees, crying. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted us to be secure. But now he's threatening me. The storm outside rumbled like a warning. I stared at her, torn between fury and pity. If what you're saying is true, I said slowly, then you've brought danger to my doorstep. She looked up, her face pale and desperate. Please, Emily, you're the only one who can stop him. I glanced at Dylan, then back at her. In that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for my money anymore. I was fighting for the truth, for my family, for everything I had left. And I knew the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The rain fell harder as I stared down at Jessica kneeling on my porch, her hair plastered to her face, her makeup running in black rivers. Every instinct in me screamed not to trust her, but there was something different in her eyes tonight. Terror. Real, raw terror. Dylan helped her inside despite my hesitation, guiding her to the couch. She was shaking violently, clutching her soaked purse as though it held her last breath of safety. "Jessica," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Start from the beginning. What did you do, and what does Mark Nolan have?" She wiped her face with trembling hands, her voice breaking. "It started after you humiliated me at that dinner, when you told Dylan you didn't trust me. I was angry. Mark said he could help me prove you were hiding money, said we could expose the truth. He promised it was just to get leverage for Dylan's future." She let out a bitter laugh. "But it wasn't about protecting Dylan. It was about power." Mark started digging deeper, into offshore accounts, old business deals, even your husband's death. My blood turned cold. "Thomas?" I whispered. "What about him?" "He said there were things about the accident that didn't add up. That if I helped him, he'd give me proof that you'd covered something up." Her voice cracked on the last word. Dylan stared at her in disbelief. "You let him investigate Dad?" "Are you insane?" "I didn't know," she cried. "He said it was routine, just background work. But then he found your old partner, someone named Harper, and paid him for sealed documents. He said they'd destroy you if they ever got out." My knees felt weak. I sat down, trying to keep my composure. "And now?" Jessica looked up at me, eyes wide with panic. "Now he wants money. $2 million by tomorrow. He said if I don't pay, he'll send everything to the SEC, the media, and..." Her gaze flickered toward Dylan. "To you." Dylan ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "This is insane. Why didn't you go to the police?" "Because he has recordings," she said, "of me admitting I helped him get access to your private data. If I go to the police, I'll go to jail." I leaned forward, voice sharp. "So you came here because you think I'll pay him off for you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Please, Emily, you're the only one who can fix this. He said he'd meet me tonight to collect. If we don't show, he'll release everything at dawn." Dylan turned to me. "Mom, we can't just let her face him alone." "We?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "She brought this snake into our lives, Dylan." "And if we don't stop him," Dylan shot back, "he'll destroy both of you. He has everything." Silence filled the room except for the rain pounding against the windows. I closed my eyes, thinking. Jessica was right about one thing. Mark Nolan had gone too far. And I wasn't going to let him burn down everything I'd built. I stood up, steady and calm. "Where's the meeting?" "At the old freight yard near the river," she said quietly. "Midnight." I checked the clock. 11:15. "Then we don't have much time." Dylan's eyes widened. "Mom, you're not actually going, are you?" "Yes," I said, grabbing my coat. "Because if this man thinks he can threaten my family, he's about to learn what kind of woman he's dealing with." Jessica followed, pale and trembling. "He's dangerous, Emily. Please don't." "Dangerous." I cut her off. "So am I when someone comes after my son." We drove through the storm, headlights slicing through the darkness, the river glistening like a sheet of glass beside us. Jessica sat in the back seat, silent, her hands twisted in her lap. Dylan drove, his knuckles white on the wheel. "Mom," he said finally, "you can't negotiate with a man like this. Let the police handle it." "The police can't protect us from a reputation ruined overnight," I said. "He's counting on fear to win." "I'm not afraid anymore." When we reached the freight yard, the place looked like a ghost town. Rusted train cars lined the tracks, puddles reflecting the faint glow of the streetlights. Jessica pointed toward an old warehouse. "That's where he said he'd be." Dylan parked behind a stack of containers. "We should stay in the car," he said. "No," I said firmly. "He needs to see me." I stepped out into the rain, feeling the cold cut through my coat. The air smelled of metal and wet concrete. As I walked toward the warehouse, I saw him, a tall man in a dark trench coat, smoking beneath the flickering light. Mark Nolan. His expression was calm, almost amused, as if he'd been expecting this moment. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said smoothly. "Or should I say, the woman behind half the shell companies in 3 states? You're quite the mystery." "And you're quite the fool," I said evenly. "You think blackmailing me will end well for you?" He smiled thinly. "Not blackmail, business. You pay and I disappear. You don't, and your perfect world burns." He held up a USB drive, letting the rain glisten off the metal. "This contains everything, financial trails, correspondence, even your husband's old files. The press will eat it alive." "You're bluffing," I said. "You don't have half the evidence you claim." His smile widened. "Then you won't mind if I send it to the Wall Street Journal tonight." He pulled out his phone. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice calm. "You won't do that," I said. "Because if you did, you'd lose your leverage. And because I know people who can erase your existence faster than you can hit send." His grin faltered for just a moment. Then Dylan appeared behind me, holding his phone. "It's over, Mark," he said. "The police are already on their way. They traced your messages. They know everything." Mark froze. "You're lying." "Try me," Dylan said, his voice steady. "I sent them the flash drive you gave Jessica. They're tracking your IP as we speak." Mark's composure cracked. He glanced at Jessica, who was crying silently behind us. "You set me up," he hissed. "You stupid, greedy—" Before he could finish, red and blue lights flashed through the rain. Police cars screeched to a stop, voices shouting commands. Mark dropped the USB drive and raised his hands as officers surrounded him. It was over. Jessica sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Dylan went to her, unsure whether to comfort her or walk away. I bent down and picked up the USB from the mud, wiping it clean with trembling fingers. One of the officers approached. "Ma'am, are you Emily Whitmore?" "Yes," I said softly. "Thank you, officer." He nodded. "We've been monitoring this man for months. He's part of a larger ring. You just saved us a lot of trouble." As they led Mark away, his eyes met mine, cold, filled with hatred. "This isn't over," he said. "People like you always fall eventually." I stared back. "Then I'll make sure to land on top." When the police left, silence returned except for the rain easing into a drizzle. Dylan walked toward me, his expression unreadable. "Mom, you did it." I nodded, exhaustion washing over me. Jessica stood a few feet away, shivering, her eyes hollow. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "I just wanted to feel safe." I looked at her for a long time. "Safety doesn't come from stealing someone else's peace," I said. "It comes from facing your own truth." We drove home in silence, the night still heavy around us. But for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. The storm had passed, but the reckoning was still ahead. Because even though Mark Nolan was gone, the damage Jessica caused wasn't so easily undone. Tomorrow, I would face the consequences. Tonight, I was just a mother, tired, scarred, but unbroken. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds like an apology after a long storm. The world outside looked almost peaceful, the trees still dripping with rain, the air clean and heavy with quiet. But inside my house, peace was a stranger I couldn't quite invite back in. The coffee sat untouched on the counter. I'd been staring at the same newspaper headline for nearly half an hour. Corporate consultant arrested in financial blackmail scheme. They didn't use Mark Nolan's name yet, but I knew it was coming. And when it did, my name wouldn't be far behind. The investigation would open doors I'd kept locked for years. Dylan came downstairs, hair still damp from the shower, his face pale but calm. "You haven't slept," he said softly. "Neither have you," I replied. He nodded, taking a seat across from me. "The police called. They want a full statement this afternoon." I expected that. "Mom," he began carefully, "there's something you're not telling me, isn't there? About Dad." The question hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to deflect, to pretend it wasn't time, but after last night, the lies felt heavier than ever. I looked at my son, the one person I'd fought all these years to protect, and said quietly, "Yes, there is." He leaned forward, his expression tightening. "Then tell me. I need to know." I drew a long breath. "Your father's death wasn't as simple as everyone believed. The car crash, yes, it was real. But it wasn't accidental." Dylan's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he made choices that put everything we owned at risk. He invested company funds into offshore ventures without telling me, without telling anyone. When I found out, I tried to fix it quietly. I thought I could save the firm, our name, and him. But by the time I discovered how deep it went, he was gone." My voice trembled on the last word. Dylan sat back, stunned. "You think, Dad?" "I don't think anything," I said. "I know he'd been threatened by investors. The night before the crash, he got a call. He left the house saying he'd handle it. That was the last time I saw him." I swallowed hard. Afterward, I found out he'd been working with someone named Harper. He helped cover up the accounts to protect the family. Mark Nolan must have found Harper and used him against us. Dylan rubbed his forehead, silent for a long moment. "So all this time you've been protecting his memory." "And you," I said. "Because no one needed to know that your father died trying to fix what he broke." "I thought the truth would destroy you." Dylan's jaw tightened, his voice breaking. "It's not the truth that destroys people, Mom. It's the lies." His words hit like a slap, but he was right. I looked away, ashamed. I did what I thought was right at the time. "You did it alone," he said. "You've always done everything alone." The room fell into silence again, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock. Then Jessica appeared in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen. She was dressed neatly, her hair tied back, but she looked smaller somehow, like all the fight had gone out of her. "I wanted to say goodbye," she said quietly. Dylan turned. "Goodbye?" "I'm turning myself in," she said. "The detective called this morning. They said I could make a statement voluntarily. I owe that much to both of you." I stood up slowly. "That's the first wise choice you've made in a long time." She met my gaze, tears brimming. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to start over, somewhere I can be honest again." Dylan walked her to the door, his face conflicted. When she reached for his hand, he hesitated, then let her go. "Goodbye, Jessica." She nodded, her lip trembling. "Take care of her," she whispered before stepping out into the sunlight. I watched her leave without saying another word. Maybe one day I'd forgive her, but not today. After she left, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not exactly peace, but space. Space for truth to breathe again. That afternoon, I went down to the police station. The air there smelled of paper and metal, sharp and sterile. Detective Morales, the same officer from the night before, greeted me with a tired smile. "Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for coming. We've confirmed your story. Mark Nolan's facing multiple charges: fraud, extortion, identity theft." "Good," I said quietly. "He's hurt enough people." "You should know," Morales continued. "He mentioned your husband in his statement. Said he had files linking him to those offshore transfers." "I know," I replied, "and I'm ready to turn everything over. I'm done keeping secrets." That evening, when I got home, Dylan was sitting on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The sky was streaked with gold and orange, the kind of sunset that made even broken things look beautiful. I sat beside him, pulling my shawl tighter. "I told them everything," I said. "About Dad, about the money, about the cover-up." He nodded slowly. "I know. Detective Morales called me after you left." "And?" "And he said you might face charges. Accessory after the fact obstruction, depending on what they find." I exhaled, steady. "If that's what happens, then I'll face it. I'm tired of living like the truth is poison." Dylan looked at me for a long time, his expression softening. "You're still my mother," he said finally. "You always will be." My throat tightened. "That's all I ever wanted to hear." We sat there quietly, the cicadas humming in the distance, the night folding around us like a blanket. Later, after he went inside, I stayed out under the stars. For the first time in years, I prayed. Not for safety, not for control, but for redemption. Maybe that's what this whole journey had been about. Not protecting what was mine, but learning what truly mattered when everything else was stripped away. The world saw me as powerful, unshakable, cold. But tonight, I was just a woman who'd lost too much pretending to be unbreakable. The truth hurt, but it also healed. And as I watched the last trace of sunlight fade from the sky, I made myself a quiet promise. I would rebuild, not from fear, but from honesty. Tomorrow, the papers would print my name. The world would whisper. But for the first time, I wouldn't hide. I would stand in the light and let whatever came, come. Because sometimes the only way to survive the wreckage is to stop running from it and start walking through it. And in that still moment, with the night closing in soft and forgiving, I realized something simple but powerful. Peace doesn't come from silence or secrets. It comes from finally telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. By the time dawn broke again, the world had already begun to change around me. The morning news channels ran my name across the ticker in bold white letters. Emily Whitmore, cooperating in financial investigation tied to late husband's estate. The anchor's voice was calm, professional, almost detached. But hearing it said aloud felt like being stripped bare in front of the world. Every secret I'd buried was now public property. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window. Outside, the street looked the same. Neighbors walking dogs, the paperboy tossing his usual folded roll. But it all felt distant, like I was watching someone else's life through glass. The phone buzzed endlessly. Journalists, old acquaintances, even family I hadn't heard from in years, all wanting to hear my side. I ignored every call except one. "Emily," Detective Morales said when I finally answered. "We're moving forward with the case against Mark Nolan. His team's trying to pin part of the cover-up on your husband's former associates. But your statement is solid. You may need to testify, though." "I expected that," I said quietly. "What about Jessica?" "She confessed to participating in the blackmail plan. She's pleading guilty in exchange for cooperation." Morales hesitated before adding, "She mentioned Dylan." My heart sank. "What about him?" "She said he didn't know anything. But the prosecution will still dig. They always do." I thanked her and hung up, pressing the phone to my chest for a long moment. I'd spent decades building a fortress of control around my life, and now every wall had fallen. Still, there was a strange freedom in the collapse. Around noon, Dylan came home. He looked worn, older somehow, like the weight of the past few days had carved something into him. "They called me in," he said. "They wanted my statement." I nodded. "What did you tell them?" "The truth," he said simply. "Everything I knew and everything I didn't." We stood there for a moment, studying each other. There was nothing left to hide now. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. He smiled faintly, but there was sorrow in it. "Mom, you might lose everything." I looked around the kitchen, at the polished marble counters, the grand staircase visible through the archway, the paintings that once meant prestige. "Then maybe it's time I did," I replied. "This house, this life, it's all built on pieces of a lie. Maybe it's time for something real." That night I couldn't sleep. The rain came again, gentle and constant, whispering against the windows. I walked down the hallway, stopping outside Dylan's old room. The door was ajar, light spilling from within. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes, old family photos, keepsakes, fragments of a life we once had. "I couldn't throw them away," he said without looking up. No matter how hard I tried. I sat beside him. "You shouldn't. They're part of who we are. Even the broken parts." He held up a photograph, one of us on the beach years ago, his father holding him on his shoulders. Was he happy then? I smiled faintly. Yes, for a while he was. He loved you more than anything. Whatever mistakes he made, that was always true. Dylan nodded slowly. I used to think we were the perfect family. But now I see, we were just people. Flawed, scared, pretending everything was fine. We still are, I said softly. But maybe that's what makes us human. He looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw forgiveness flicker behind his eyes. It wasn't full, not yet, but it was enough. 2 days later, the trial began. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps, flashes blinding, voices shouting my name. Mrs. Whitmore! Did you know about the fraud? Were you complicit? I kept walking, chin high, heart steady. Inside, the courtroom felt cold, every surface polished to perfection. Mark Nolan sat at the defendant's table, handcuffed, his face drawn and gray. When our eyes met, a flash of something, anger, regret, maybe both, passed between us. He'd thought he could control everything. So had I. And look where it had led us. Jessica was there too, pale and trembling, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When I passed her, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I paused, then nodded once. So am I. When it was my turn to testify, I told the truth. Every piece of it. The room was silent except for my voice. I talked about my husband's final night, the secrets he'd hidden, the deals that had cost him his life. I confessed the fear, the shame, the desperation that drove me to protect what was left. And when I finished, I looked straight at the judge and said, "I am not innocent. But I am done being silent." There was no applause, no relief, just quiet understanding. The truth, once spoken, has its own kind of power. After court adjourned, Dylan found me outside on the steps. "You did it," he said softly. "I told the truth," I corrected. "That's all." He nodded, slipping an arm around my shoulders. "That's more than most people ever do." We stood there together, watching the crowd disperse. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like running. Later that night, the house was silent again. Jessica's confession had gone public, and the news cycle had moved on to the next scandal. I turned off the TV and sat by the fireplace, the flames dancing low and steady. Dylan came in holding 2 mugs of tea. "Do you think we'll be okay?" he asked. I looked into the fire, the light flickering across his face. "I think okay isn't the same as it used to be," I said. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing," he smiled faintly. "You sound like Dad when you say stuff like that." I laughed quietly, surprised by how natural it felt. Maybe I finally understand him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The storm outside began to fade, the night settling into stillness. I realized that peace doesn't always come in grand gestures or perfect endings. Sometimes it comes in quiet rooms, shared tea, and the unspoken forgiveness between a mother and her son. When I finally went to bed, I stood by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the garden. Tomorrow would bring more headlines, more questions. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The world could judge me however it wanted. I had told the truth. I had faced the wreckage. And somehow, in the ruins of everything I once tried to control, I'd found something far more valuable than wealth or reputation. I'd found my soul again. The morning after my testimony, I woke to a kind of silence I hadn't known in years. It wasn't empty. It was calm, steady, honest. The storm had passed, though the damage remained. I brewed my coffee and walked out to the porch, the air crisp and scented faintly with pine. For the first time, the world didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like the aftermath of one. Broken, yes, but still alive. The paper was already at my doorstep. I didn't have to read the headline to know my name was there again. Emily Whitmore, the woman who spoke the truth. For a moment, I just stared at it, unsure whether to laugh or cry. It was strange how quickly people went from judging to admiring, from condemning to forgiving. But forgiveness from strangers meant little. The forgiveness I needed had to come from within. Later that morning, Dylan found me sitting outside, coffee in hand. He looked better, rested, lighter somehow. "The prosecutors called," he said, sitting down beside me. "They're not pressing charges against you. They said your cooperation saved the case." I nodded slowly, absorbing the words. So it's over. Not yet, he said. But it's close. We sat in silence for a while, watching the leaves fall from the big oak in the yard. Autumn had come early that year, as if the world was ready to let go too. After a moment, Dylan spoke again, his voice soft but steady. You know, I used to think strength meant never showing weakness. That's what I learned from you. But now, I think strength is the opposite. I looked at him, the sunlight catching in his eyes. You learned that faster than I did. He smiled faintly. Maybe because I watched you do both. His words sank deep, stirring something fragile inside me. For years I'd built walls to protect him from pain, never realizing those same walls kept love out too. I'm sorry, I said quietly, for making you think you had to be perfect to be loved. Dylan reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. I never needed perfect, Mom. I just needed you. That simple truth undid me. Tears welled in my eyes, but for once I didn't hide them. They fell freely, tears of regret, of relief, of release. For so long, I'd been afraid that my mistakes had made me unworthy of love. But sitting there with my son's hand in mine, I realized love wasn't something you earned. It was something you chose to give, even when it hurt. That afternoon, I went to visit Jessica. She'd been granted a short release from custody before sentencing. When I walked into the small visitor's room, she looked up, startled. You came. I did, I said, taking the seat across from her. She looked thinner, paler, haunted in a way I once had been. I didn't expect you to, she said softly. After everything I did, I came because I know what it feels like to lose yourself, I interrupted. To become someone you don't recognize. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I thought if I had money, power, something, I could finally feel safe. I was wrong. Safety doesn't come from control, I said gently. It comes from surrender. She looked down, her fingers twisting in her lap. I wish I'd known that sooner. So do I said. But it's never too late to start over. We sat in silence for a while, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the space between us. Then Jessica whispered, Do you think Dylan will ever forgive me? I thought for a moment before answering. Forgiveness isn't something you wait for. It's something you live toward. One day, maybe. But right now, just focus on becoming someone worth forgiving. When I stood to leave, she looked up at me with wet eyes. You didn't have to come. I know, I said. That's why I did. Outside, the sky was overcast, the air heavy with the smell of rain. I tilted my face upward, letting a few drops touch my skin. Maybe this was what cleansing really felt like. Not sudden, not miraculous, but quiet and patient. Over the next few weeks, life began to shift in small but meaningful ways. Dylan started teaching again, taking a position at a local community college. He said it made him feel useful, grounded. As for me, I sold the mansion. The house had become a museum of ghosts, too large, too full of memories that hurt more than they healed. I bought a modest cottage near the lake instead. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, honestly mine. Sometimes in the evenings, I'd sit on the dock and watch the sunset ripple across the water. The air would be still, the only sound the quiet lap of waves. That was where I felt closest to peace. Not the kind of peace you chase, but the kind that finds you when you finally stop running. One evening, Dylan visited with his son, my grandson, Ethan. The boy was 5, bright-eyed and full of life. He ran across the dock, laughing, calling out, "Grandma, look!" as he tossed pebbles into the lake. Each splash sent ripples outward, soft and wide. I smiled, watching him. "You have your father's energy," I said. "And your courage," Dylan added quietly beside me. I turned to him, touched. "Courage?" He nodded. "You faced everything you feared, and you told the truth even when it cost you everything. That's courage. I looked out at the water again, my heart swelling with something deeper than pride, something like gratitude. Maybe, I said softly, or maybe it's just time. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in gold and rose. Ethan ran up, his hands wet and cold, and I pulled him into my arms. For a moment, I felt the weight of 3 generations, the brokenness, the healing, the hope. And I realized that maybe redemption isn't about fixing the past. Maybe it's about living differently in the present. As the evening deepened, Dylan put an arm around my shoulder. "You ever think about writing all this down?" he asked. I laughed quietly. "Who would want to read it?" "More people than you think," he said. "There's power in your story, Mom. People need to know it's never too late to tell the truth." I smiled, looking out over the lake. "Maybe one day," I said. "But for now, I think I'll just live it." When night finally fell, the stars came out bright and clear, reflected perfectly in the still water below. I sat there long after they went inside, breathing in the cool air, feeling every heartbeat like a promise. I had lost everything I once thought mattered. But in the wreckage, I'd found something stronger: truth, forgiveness, and a love that refused to die. And in that quiet, starlit peace, I whispered to the night, "Thank you for breaking me." Because only then could I be made whole again. The next morning, the rain finally stopped. The sky, once heavy with sorrow, now held a fragile brightness, like God had taken his hand and gently wiped away the tears of the world. Emily stood by the window of her small home, her fingers pressed against the cool glass, watching the sunlight spill across the fields where the storm had raged just hours before. It was quiet now, the kind of quiet that comes only after something breaks and begins to heal. The world outside looked changed, but so did she. Her heart, once so burdened with guilt, now felt lighter. She had lost much: her father, her home, her sense of safety, but she had gained something deeper. She had found grace. Real grace. The kind that doesn't erase the pain but walks with you through it. As she poured herself a cup of coffee, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from the hospital. "We're pleased to inform you your father's medical expenses have been fully covered." A donation was made anonymously. Her hands trembled as she read the words again. Anonymous. She didn't need to guess. She knew. Nathan. She hadn't seen him since that night at the church. She remembered how he had walked away, his shoulders heavy, his face turned toward the rain. They hadn't spoken since, but this act was his way of saying what words couldn't. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness this time, but from something pure. Forgiveness. She had forgiven him the night she saw the pain in his eyes, but this moment sealed it. He had given back the very thing he once took away. Peace. She whispered softly. "Thank you, Nathan," her voice carried away by the morning light. Later that afternoon, she drove to the old chapel again, the one where everything had changed. The doors creaked as she pushed them open, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. The air smelled of wood and candle wax, of something ancient and sacred. She sat in the same pew where she had once cried out to God, begging for understanding. Now, she didn't need answers. She needed only to give thanks. Her voice trembled as she prayed, "Lord, you took me through the fire, but you never let me burn. You broke me, but only to remake me. Thank you for showing me that love isn't about perfection. It's about redemption." And as she prayed, she felt it. The peace she had been chasing for so long finally resting inside her. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was simple, quiet, whole. As she stood to leave, she noticed something tucked into the corner of the pew. It was a folded piece of paper, slightly damp, with her name written in a familiar hand. Her breath caught as she opened it. Emily, I didn't know how to say goodbye, or how to ask forgiveness for the things I've done. I don't expect you to understand, but I needed you to know. Meeting you changed me. You taught me what love really means. Not the easy kind, but the kind that costs something. The kind that heals even when it hurts. I'm leaving town, but not running away this time. I'm going where I can do good, where I can build again, maybe even find peace. Thank you for showing me grace when I didn't deserve it. Keep walking in the light. You were right. God's love never leaves us, even when we think it has. Nathan. Her tears fell freely as she pressed the letter to her chest. There was no anger left, no regret, only gratitude. Nathan's words felt like closure and a new beginning all at once. She whispered, "Go in peace," knowing he already had. That night, Emily stood outside under the stars. The sky was endless, alive with shimmering light. It reminded her that no matter how dark things get, light always returns. She thought about her father, about Nathan, about herself. They had all been broken in different ways, yet somehow, each had been remade by the same love, the love that doesn't give up, the love that saves. As a cool breeze swept across her face, she realized something profound. The miracle wasn't that the storm had passed. The miracle was that she had survived it with her faith still intact, and maybe that's what the whole journey had been about. Learning to love when it hurts, learning to forgive when it's hard, learning to trust that God's plan is still good, even when it breaks you first. She turned toward the house, her steps slow but steady, a small smile curving her lips. Life would never be perfect, but it would be real, and that was enough. Before she went inside, she looked once more at the horizon where dawn would soon rise again. If someone's out there hurting tonight, she said softly, almost like a prayer, I hope they know. This pain isn't the end. There's light waiting on the other side. You just have to hold on. If this story has touched your heart, maybe it's because deep down, we all carry our own storm. We've all been Nathan at some point, running from the truth, drowning in guilt, or Emily, standing in the ruins asking God why. But the truth is, no matter how far we fall, grace still finds us, even when we think we're too broken, too late, too lost. He reaches down and says, You're still mine. The world might tell you to fight harder, to build walls, to protect yourself from pain. But Jesus shows us another way, to open our hearts, even when it hurts, to forgive, even when it feels impossible, and to love, even when it costs us something. Because that's the kind of love that changes everything. If you've ever walked through darkness and thought you wouldn't make it out, this story is a reminder. You will. You're stronger than you think, and you're never walking alone. So tonight, take a deep breath. Let go of what you can't control. Forgive what's behind you and trust what's ahead. There's light coming. And if this story spoke to your soul, if it reminded you of grace you once knew, or the grace you still need, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Let someone else feel the hope you found here. Because maybe, just maybe, that's how healing begins. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this. Stories of grace, redemption, and the incredible ways God still moves among us. Together, let's keep spreading light in a world that desperately needs it. Because love, real love, the kind that Jesus lived, it still changes everything.